Good morning, everyone. New video. I figured I would do this Joshua recap video differently. I think I did this before for another one where I did kind of like a week in my morning time, so that is the plan. This is me in the morning. It's been a rough morning. So yeah, I have my Bible here. I have my cart over there, and I do have my phone here, my laptop, because this is where I type out my notes so we can chat. And yeah, on my phone, what I've been doing lately, because I've been very distracted, is actually pulling up my Bible app on my phone and playing the audio along as reading. This is something I've done for maybe the past 2 or 3 years. And I've done like a Bible tip video and mentioned this, but I totally forgot about it until someone mentioned listening to the Bible, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to do this all the time. So I did that for Deuteronomy, and it helped so much with my focus, and I was just able to listen to the words and see the words and just find more things. So the plan is to do that now as I read Joshua. I am a little bit behind on my behind. There's no such thing as being behind, but I'm not where I want to be, and I've had to adjust my YouTube content schedule a lot. And we will chat. Maybe we'll add some notes in here together this week. Something I've been wanting to do with you guys, and we'll see what everything is looking like. So I feel like this is gonna go well, and this is more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like Deuteronomy or Leviticus where we're getting a lot of information. It's more historical recounting of what is happening with the people. You know, you have the story of Rahab, the sin of Achan. They are giving us some land here, so my memory of Joshua ain't the best. But before we start, what I like to do, go into like my life application Bible and my commentaries, and just look up like the overview, their introductions for the book. And that is really what day one is getting an overview of what this book is, seeing what they consider the key verse or the themes, and try and find that out. For Deuteronomy, I didn't do that till about the middle, when I started seeing things repeat itself, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like, I should look up what the purpose, which is what I was normally doing. Deuteronomy just threw me off. I've also been doing a really bad job at my word study this year, so hopefully we can get back on that eventually. I like my life application Bible because it gives a lot of information. It also gives a lot of like character profiles. So this is just what the page looks like for Joshua. As you can see, there's a ton of information, and I like that at the top, I don't know if you guys could see that, there's like a timeline of things happening. And my glasses are so dirty. Here it says the purpose is to give the history of Israel's conquest of the promised land. Key verse 111, within 3 days you shall pass over the Jordan to go to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you to possess it. So this is just Israel going into the promised land. That is what we are going to be reading about. And yeah, so I'm gonna just keep looking at different things, and I'm going to read, and then we can chat. So I finished reading to about chapter 5-ish. Yeah, this is so flattering. That's the thing with these like weeks, or a week or a few days in my quiet time. Like, you get me. You don't get dressed up me. You just get me, who I am, how I am at the moment. Enjoy. As I'm going through Joshua, my life application Bible actually broke this down into 3 parts, the book. One is entering the promised land, the second one is conquering the promised land, and then the third part is dividing of the promised land. So I just read through the part that was about entering the promised land, and this is what my Life Application Bible had to say about that. It said, after wandering for 40 years in the wilderness, a new generation is ready to enter Canaan. But first, God prepares both Joshua and the nation by teaching them the importance of courageous and consistent faith. The nation then miraculously crosses the Jordan River to begin the long-awaited conquest of the Promised Land. Like Joshua, we need faith in order to begin and continue living the Christian life. And then in my Bible Knowledge commentary, it said that the title of Joshua, or the name of Joshua, means Yahweh saves, or Yahweh is salvation, and the title suitably describes what God used Joshua to do, saving his people by conquering Canaan and perpetuating it, appropriating, oh my goodness, and appropriating it to Israel as their promised land. That is kind of like an overview of what Joshua is about. And let's quickly go through the first 5 chapters. Let's chat about everything that I've learned. I'm trying to yeah, that works. Chapter 1, we just see it 4 times mentioned. 4 times, that's 8. We see 4 times God says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Verses 6, 7, 9, and 18. He repeats that multiple times. God wanted the people to know that God was on their side. They would be victorious if only they were strong and courageous and had faith and trust in the Lord. Chapter 2, we read the story of Rahab and how she hides the spies. She was a prostitute. She hid the spies that came in to survey the land, and she hid them from people that were pursuing them. She tells the spies that they have heard all that their God has done for them. She acknowledges God as the one true God of heaven and earth. She says, at the end of verse 11, she says, for the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. So she's just proclaiming, like, your God is God. And she eventually does marry one of the spies and is the mother of Boaz, and because of that is in the lineage of Christ, which is mentioned in Matthew 1:5, and she is also one of the 2 women mentioned in Hebrews 11, which is like the hall of faith, in verse 31. And also another side note that I noticed, because this gets repeated twice in these first 5 chapters, she says when the people heard what the Lord did, their hearts melted and there was no spirit left in any man. That was verse 11. Yeah, she says, as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. And that's what she declares, that the Lord, is God, after hearing everything that the Lord had done. Chapter 3, we see the people getting ready to cross over the Jordan. You know, God tells Joshua that he would exalt him, Joshua, in the sight of all Israel, and that they would know that as he, God, was with Moses, he, God, is with Joshua. That was verse 7. And in verse 17, somewhere around here, verse 17, the last verse of that chapter, we noticed a change in verbiage when it comes to the Israelites. In the beginning, like verse 14, you see, so when the people, the Israelites, set out from their camps to pass over the Jordan, like they're calling them the people, it says before the people, and as soon as those bearing the people, they're constantly referred to as the people. After they cross over the Jordan, they are now referred to as a nation. And I think that's very significant, because now they're no longer just a people wandering. They are a nation. The Lord is working on making them a nation, giving them land, and that is important. We see that in chapter 4. Now, I will say in chapter 4, you do see them still being referred to as the people of Israel, but they are now a nation. And I thought that was very important, because you see that in verse 17, the end of that chapter. It says, now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until the nation finished passing over the Jordan. And then in verse 4, we see that they've crossed the river, and the 12 men, one of each tribe, are building a memorial of 12 stones to remember what the Lord did that day. The last verse of chapter 4, verse 24 says, so that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. It's just a reminder to remind the people, to remind the generations, this is what the Lord has done, which is similar to what the Lord did with Moses when he he took them out of slavery, out of Egypt, by parting the Red Sea, and he's bringing them into their promised land by parting the Jordan, which I think is very symbolic. Chapter 5 up until verse 12, we read again in verse 1 that the hearts of the kings surrounding Israel melted, and that there was no longer any spirit in them. So I thought that was very interesting that it says it again, and I think that's just very powerful. It's a show of God's power, that these people could just hear of the Lord and what he has done, and that they know deep inside that the Lord is God, and that it's kind of like a fear, like the Lord is coming. Verse 2, we see that Joshua was performing a second circumcision, and that is because, and it explains it as you keep going, it literally says, and the reason for this, verse 5, but it says that, those that came out of Egypt were circumcised, but then they wandered in, the wilderness for 40 years, so they were circumcising the newer generation. And then verses 10 to 12, we are reading how they are observing the Passover, and how they also ate of the produce of the land in Gilgal. And that was once the manna stopped. It says, and the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land, and there was no longer manna for the people of Israel. But they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So God provided up until they had land, which is amazing. So that is the first 5 chapters of Joshua. My quiet time for today, which took me a little longer to do. It's a little broken up, but it's done. I still look like this, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Good morning, everyone. It is the next day. My hair, I tried a slick little pony bun situation. I'm not loving it. The brain's gotta catch up to me this morning. I woke up early this morning, and then I went back to sleep. I put myself back to sleep. I was like, it's okay, go to sleep. So annoying. Trying to get back on the routine of waking up nice and early, before the sun's even out, and reading my Bible, walking on the treadmill, doing all the things, so that way I don't feel like I'm rushing. Today's reading, what am I reading? Joshua, the rest of chapter 5 to I think 13 for today. Between today and tomorrow, I think I'm gonna add some notes to my Bible. I want to add the purpose stuff notes, the notes on Rahab, and just get some things in my Bible. I have so many things to add into my Bible. All these little flaps here are all notes that are just sticky noted into my Bible that I want to insert and put in there. I think in my last week in my life, I did notes for Leviticus. I did this thing. Not my favorite. It's definitely something I want to fix. All right, so I'm gonna read my Bible. I'm not gonna take too long chatting here. I'm gonna read and then continue, and then we'll chat. Alrighty, so I plugged in my mic because the audio on my camera is terrible if there's any little bit of noise, and yesterday my laptop, the fan was running, and so that's mostly what you hear, it's in the background, so hopefully that's not too annoying. But I finished reading, and I figured we'd go over what I read, what we got from Joshua, day 2, chapters, the end of 5 to 12. So for the end of chapter 5, we kind of see just Yesterday we talked about the new circumcision, the ending of the manna, the provision of manna, and then Joshua, what did it say? He lifted up his eyes, and a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand, and he was a commander of the army of the Lord, and, informed Joshua that where his feet were, like, to remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy. And I think that was just like the Lord making himself known to Joshua, just like he had to Moses. Like, obviously very different because Moses knew God face to face, but like this was like that moment. Chapter 6 is the fall of the walls of Jericho. And this is like another work of the Lord, because these men, God told them, every day for 6 days, just walk around the wall once. The men will blow their trumpets. The other men won't say anything. But on the 7th day, you will shout after you walk around the wall 7 times, and the trumpets are blown, and you will shout and cry for the Lord, and the walls will fall. And then that's where they go and destroy the city. It's devoted to destruction for the Lord, except for Rahab's building with her family, and they save her. And but the Lord also instructs them in verse 18, but you keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, unless when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. Like, that was the Lord's warning. Like, these things are for destruction. They're not for you to take back to the camp. In chapters 7 and 8, we see the consequence of sin. Achan did take some of the things that should have been destroyed and brought it to the camp, and we see in verse 1, it says he took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. Because of one man's sin, all of Israel suffered a consequence. When they went to fight, who was it? Ai, like the men of Ai, they were defeated. Some of their men were dying, which had not happened before. And God tells Joshua it's because Israel has sinned. Verse 12, therefore the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies because they have become devoted for destruction. I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things among you. Get up, consecrate the people. And we just see that, Achan admits his sin, and then he is, stoned, him and his family. But sin is serious. In my Life Application Bible, it said, Achan underestimated God. It may have been a small thing to Achan, but the effects of his sin were felt by the entire nation. Like Achan, our actions affect more people than just ourselves. Beware of the temptation to rationalize your sin by saying they are too small or too personal to hurt anyone but you. And that is so true. We don't know the effects of our sin, and clearly Achan did not realize that the effects of his sin would affect the entire nation. After that, brought into the hands of them the city of Ai and gave them victory over that, but it came at a cost. And then as we keep going into like chapter 9, 10, 11, in chapter 9, the Gibeonites deceive the people. They deceive the leaders of Israel, Joshua and them. They come and pretend that they're coming from far, far away, and they weren't. But in verse 14, it says, so the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. They did not ask God what he wanted them to do. God was their leader. God was the one in charge. Yes, he appointed Joshua before the men, but they should have went to God. They did not come to God before making a peace or a pact with these foreigners, and it ultimately bites them in the booty. That it says, Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the leaders of the congregation swore to them. At the end of 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors and that they lived among them. And this was in direct disobedience to God's word, like to what God had commanded them. They were to make no covenant. They were to make no covenant with any foreign people, any people from the land. That's from Exodus 23:32 and 34:12 and Deuteronomy 7:2. And they were also supposed to completely destroy these cities, which obviously they couldn't do with them anymore because they made this pact that they would not harm them. And that was from Numbers 33:55 and Deuteronomy 20:17-18. And I thought it was interesting the reason why the Gibeonites tell like Joshua why they did this. And it was because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy the inhabitants of the land before you. So they knew what God had commanded the people. They knew what they were supposed to do. So I just think it's very interesting that they knew that they should have been destroyed. But the Lord is gracious and merciful, and even though they disobeyed God, they had to keep this oath that they made with the people. But I thought something interesting that it says here says that the other kings in chapter 10, it said he feared greatly because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were warriors. So even though they did not destroy and go into these cities, these people were of value. There's that. And then the other kings came up against them because they were worried now, because they knew that Joshua and the people were destroying the other cities, and now they had the Gibeonites on their side. They come against the Gibeonites and then they go and fight, and God gives them victory. He makes them victorious. And also I found interesting is that in verse 12 and 13, at that time Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon? And the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance of their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jashar, the sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for a whole day? There's been no day like it before or since when the Lord heeded the voice of man, for the Lord fought for Israel. So I just thought it was interesting that the Lord granted that to Joshua. It's like a show of God's power. Like he allowed this, but it's like it's truly showing the power of the Lord. And then that book, the book of Jashar, it's mentioned twice. It's mentioned here, and then it's also mentioned in 2 Samuel. And I was trying to figure out like what it was. My Life Application Bible just says that, these were men, and there obviously were other literatures out there, so they would reference probably things of their time. Many of these books are not found anymore, but I would have to do a deep dive to truly understand all of that. And then it says in verse 25, and Joshua said to them, do not be afraid or dismayed, be strong and courageous, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. So I just thought it was awesome that it's brought back up again to be strong and courageous. And God just made them victorious as they fought and destroyed all the cities of Canaan. And I just realized I forgot to read, because this section, chapters 5 through 12, are about conquering the promised land. And here it says, in my Life Application Bible, it said, Joshua and his army moved from city to city, cleansing the land of its wickedness by destroying every trace of idol worship. Conflict with evil is inevitable, and we should be as merciless as Israel in destroying sin in our lives. So I like that contrast of Israel going out to war and destroying and devoting all that stuff to devoting it all to destruction for the Lord, as us in sin. Because it's true, just like in the last book in Deuteronomy, where it constantly said to purge evil from your midst. Like, it's a very important thing to do. It's not something to be taken lightly. And I just like that theme is still brought in to here. And then chapter 12, the last chapter, here it's like a recap of all the kings and nations that were defeated by Israel when Moses was leading, and then also all the kings and nations that were defeated when Joshua was leading the people. So that was this day. Tomorrow we'll be finishing Joshua, and that will be the end of this video. We've been chatting for a while, so yeah. Anything else I need to say to y'all? So I will see you guys in the morning. I don't know where my tripod is. I just saw it earlier. But hello, good morning. It is another morning, and I figured I would share with you guys. It's taken me a few extra days. I thought I would be finished with this last section of Joshua in one day, but it's taken me a little longer, which is fine. So I figured I'd go over what I have so far, and then I have 2 more chapters to read this morning, and then we will be done. I didn't record the last couple days just because I've literally just read, and then I compiled my thoughts yesterday. You didn't miss much, just me flipping through the book. I'm in my PJs. I have toothpaste on my shirt. This is just like what it is. So let's chat a little bit. Also, but Joshua, let me go to where I need to be first. This last section is very, very simple. Granted, there's probably more if you look into it, but I'm not doing deep study, so not doing that. In my Life Application Bible, it did say, like, this last section, chapters 13 to 24, is the dividing of the promised land, which is what we're reading. We're reading what each tribe is allotted, what their inheritance is. And it says, Joshua urged the Israelites to continue to follow the Lord and worship him alone. The people had seen God deliver them from many enemies and miraculously provide for all their needs. But they were prone to wander from the Lord. Even though we may have experienced God at work in our lives, we too must continually renew our commitment to obey him above all other authority and to worship him alone. Oh, also, what I did while we've been away is add some notes. Closed my Bible and found it. I'm losing my mind. Some days are just... Also, what else did you guys miss? My closet door fell on me, so that's why it's a mess back there. So for the beginning, Joshua, I think I mentioned wanting to do notes. So if you haven't seen my previous video, the video right before this one was how I was adding notes into my Bible. I lost my overhead camera attachment thing, so, but I think it was a great way to show you guys what I do. So you can see that I added this page. You can see I added this page right here and this little flap right here, and just added the notes from the beginning of each chapter or section that I've been reading. Just kind of like a quick little overview of the book. So yeah, so I figured I'd share that with you guys. And now to chat about these next sections. Joshua is old. And, he's telling the Lord that, and God tells him that he himself will drive out the people, the other nations on the land. And then Joshua starts dividing the land between the other tribes because Moses had already given Dan, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh their land on the other side of the Jordan. And something interesting that I found is when we are giving the inheritance to, I think this is on where Moses was giving the inheritance. It says in verse 13, yet the people of Israel did not drive out the Gershites or the Maccathites, but Gersha and Maccath dwell in the midst of Israel to this day. So they failed to do what the Lord commanded us to drive out all the people. We see that again in chapter, 14. Caleb gets his inheritance. And then starting in 15, we see the division of the tribes on the other side of the Jordan that Joshua is giving out. And we see that for the people of Judah, it says the tribe of Judah got their land, but in 1563, it says, but the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah could not drive out. So the Jebusites dwell with the people of Judah at Israel to this day. We see that again for the people of the half tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim. The ending of chapter 16 and 17, they did not drive out all the inhabitants. And we see that again, that they did not drive out the inhabitants. In 17, 12, and 13, they tried to say that the Canaanites were too strong. The hill country is not enough for us, yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, both those in Bethshean and its villages and those in the valley of Jezreel. They try to blame it on the Canaanites being too strong, having all these things. That's why they couldn't overpower them. And Joshua reminds them, but the hill country shall be yours, for though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to the furthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong. Like, he tells them, like, you must do what the Lord commands. And then as the chapters keep going up until chapter 19, we see the division of the land. For the order of it was, let's see, we had the ones on the other side, but then on the west side it was Judah first, then the half tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim, Benjamin, Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, Dan. Oh, so not Dan with Reuben, Gad with Reuben. Got that confused. So then chapters 20 and 21, we see the cities that are put aside for refuge, and the cities and pasture lands that are allotted to the Levites. They did not get an inheritance, but each of the tribes kind of give them a city to pasture their lands and to just have a place. And this must have been from a sermon, like while my pastor was preaching, or when I read through this last year, I don't remember. But verses 43 to the end, to 45, the end of chapter 21, it says, Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers, and took possession of it, and they settled there. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hand. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. And like I just had wrote here in my Bible, sometimes I don't just write notes, sometimes I write like prayers or just kind of like a reflection of what I got from this. But God is good. He gives us reminders of his love and grace. And then I put like my pastor's message on Titus 2, 1-3 was what I needed, things I got from it. Knowing God's word creates confidence. I shouldn't care what the culture does. I should care about what Christ wants me to do. A random quote that I put here is, we have nothing to offer God, but he has everything to offer us. And also just reading this, you realize that God gave them everything. His word was true. There was nothing he said that he didn't do. Even when he says, not one of all their enemies had withstood them. Israel had the power and the strength and had the Lord on their side to do his command. The fact that they didn't drive out all the people in the land just showed their lack of confidence in God, and their just who even knows, they're just like us. So it was probably partly a fear, but also partly laziness, kind of like, well, we've got the upper hand now, like why do they need to leave our land completely? I'm gonna finish reading the last 3 chapters and then we can chat a little bit more. Let me get my notes out. We finished chatting at chapter 21. So chapter 22, Joshua is sending the tribes that live on the east side of the Jordan back to their place, and he's giving them a warning to keep the charge of the Lord. As you read, it says in verse 5, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to keep his commandments, to cling to him, to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. And I like that he gives that reminder, because it truly is a faith walk. It's about a changed heart. God knows that the people could not keep all the commandments. It was there to show them that they needed to put their faith and trust in the Lord to accomplish anything. So I listed that out. I might make a little list there. Then as the tribes head out, they build an altar, and at first the other people of Israel are like, oh no, they've deserted the Lord, what is going to happen? And they assure them no, this is to be a witness between both our sides. You can see this from both sides of the Jordan, to remind our people that we are also the Lord's people, even though we're on this side of the Jordan, is to remind the generations what the Lord has done, is to be a witness. And then as we get to chapters 23 and 24, Joshua is kind of giving a last kind of speech, final word, a charge to the Israelite people. Verse 6, 7, 8, 11, he says, Therefore be very strong to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses. First, he tells them what not to do. Not to serve, not to swear by, not to bow down, and not to mix with these nations and their other gods. But he tells them to cling to the Lord and he tells them to be careful to love the Lord. And I think that's very important. He also gives them a warning that, like, if you don't do this, the Lord will turn his back on you. He will, these people that you are allowing in will be a thorn to your side, will be a whip on your sides, thorns in your eyes, and you will perish from the good ground of the Lord that he has given you. Like, you will lose it all. And he just reminds them again that everything the Lord has said he would do has not failed. Like, the Lord has said he would do it, and he has done it, and the Lord does what he says he is going to do. Reminder that the Lord does not lie. The Lord provides, and the Lord is great and awesome and powerful and strong. Then as you get into chapter 24, the first chunk of it is like a recap. The Lord is reminding the people what he did, bringing Abraham out, giving Jacob his land, them going to Egypt and everything he did in Egypt and their escape from Egypt, and just his deliverance of them from there, and how he helped them acquire the inheritance, the promised land that he said that he would give to them. And then just his final words before he dies. He says, fear and serve the Lord with all faithfulness and sincerity. That's verse 14. And this is where you see the verse that says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Because he says, if you think it's evil to serve the Lord, you must choose whether you will serve the Lord or you will serve all these other gods. And then he asks the people, like, are you going to serve the Lord? And the people respond with, we will serve the Lord, for he is our God. And he reminds them again, if you don't do this, this is what will happen. It's a warning. Like, the Lord will turn his back on you. Like, you cannot forsake the Lord. And they said, no, we will serve the Lord. They said again, he says, like, you are a witness against yourself that you've chosen the Lord to serve him. And they acknowledge that they are a witness to themselves, that they have chosen the Lord. And then at the end, Joshua dies, and it says that Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. And I think that's important, because you'll see in Judges that the people forget. The people stop serving the Lord, and that's why God calls judges to judge the people and to bring them back to him. And then we see that the bones of Joseph are finally buried now that the people have their land. And yeah, that is the end of Joshua. I kind of like this whole, like, dividing it up. I feel like it's an easier way to get everything that I'm getting out of the book to share it with you guys, and just kind of see realistically how I'm doing this, how I'm reading my Bible these days in the life. Like, it never looks the same, and I can show you even a more realistic. It's just me sitting here, but sometimes it's not just me sitting here. Sometimes it's just me reading and not getting a ton out of something. So thank you guys for watching these videos. Thank you guys for enjoying these recap videos, because they are encouraging me to just, like, dig deeper into my reading when that wasn't my plan, but it's been so good, and just seeing the connections within everything. I'm super excited to get into Judges. Oh my goodness, I cannot speak this morning. I need to go. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.